This video covers question 3, part D here from the 2022 AP Calculus AB Calculator Not Allowed section of the test. I cover parts A, B, and C in previous videos. If you need help with those, go ahead and go back and watch those videos. The information that we'll bring from previous videos that we need to know here is just what these values from part A were. F of 0 and f of 5, so I'll kind of pull those out. F of 0 was equal to 3 plus 2 pi, and then f of 5 was equal to 7 over 2. And so from there, we'll be able to use that information again, and we'll use a little bit of what we did on part C, but for the most part, this is going to be net new. So again, the first thing you always want to make sure you notice, if you hadn't already on a problem like this, is what the graph is that you're looking at. So we have the graph of f prime up above. So now that we know all that info, let's dive into what part D is specifically asking us here. So it's saying for the function g defined in part C, so that's this function here, find the absolute minimum value on the interval 0 to 7 and justify your answer. So absolute minimum value, that's going to end up being a y value. So what I always tell people is when you get these situations like absolute max min, that's a step-by-step process that you should know how to do. And even if you don't have a nice pretty function to work with, you want to follow that process and see where it leads you. So we're going to do that here. We're going to go through the absolute max min process and see where it leads us. So we're trying to find the absolute minimum of this equation here. So where g of x is equal to f of x minus x. Step one of that absolute max min process is always to find your derivative. So in this situation, g prime of x would equal, and these are just notation games as we come through here, the derivative of f of x would be f prime of x, and then the derivative of negative x would just be negative 1 following our power rule. Then step 2 of this process is always the same. You want to find your critical value. So you want to know when does f prime of x minus 1 equals 0. So take your derivative, set it equal to 0. That's what you do to find critical values. And then solve it out. So we'd end up with add 1, add 1. So whenever 1 is equal to f prime of x, that's where we're going to have our critical value. This is a y value right here. And then this is the graph that we're looking at over on this side. So if I go at 1 and sort of draw my y value here at 1, then I can see that I would run into that at 5. So the derivative of f prime, so f prime of x is equal to 1. Again, you just got to follow your logic here. Even though we're talking about g overall, this is information we're finding by using our derivative of f graph. So out of there, we end up finding that x equals 5. This is our critical value. And usually they like you to notate when you found a critical value. Like, lets them know that you found a critical value. Then step 3 of your absolute max min process is always the same. We're going to plug in all our critical values and the endpoints of our interval into the original function, right? So we always plug them back into that original function. The largest y value out of that list is the absolute max, and the smallest y value out of that list is what we want, which is the absolute minimum. So we would come through and we would say, okay, I want to know what does g of 5 equal. That's my critical value. I also need my endpoints from my interval. So I need to know what's happening at g of 0, and I need to know what's happening at g of 7. Don't overthink this. This is function notation, which says whatever I replace x with here, you replace x with in the actual equation. So on this one, I need to know what is f of 5 minus 5 going to equal. On this one, I need to know what is f of 0 minus 0 going to equal. And on this one, I need to know what is f of 7 minus 7 going to equal. And once I know those values, then I can compare them and can pick the smallest value for my absolute min. The first two here, this is where we needed information back from part A. So we found f of 5 back on part A. F of 5 was 7 over 2. So 7 over 2 minus 5, That would be 7 over 2. Finding your common denominator, that'd be 10 over 2. And so here we would end up with negative 3 over 2 for our y value. Then doing 0, that's the other piece of information we needed from back in part A. F of 0 is 3 plus 2 pi, and then we're going to minus 0 off of that, and we end up with 3 plus 2 pi. So for sure that's not going to be the minimum because that is definitely a positive number, right? 3 plus 2 pi is positive, which is going to be larger than this number here. So that can't be the answer. Now the tricky part comes down here on finding f of 7. We weren't asked to do that back on part A, but now we kind of are. So from here, you could come through and say, okay, f of 7, I'd have to follow the same process I did back on A. And what you did on A was you took the integral from the value you knew, which was at an x value of 4. And this time we're trying to find an x value of 7 of our derivative. And what we found out was that that was going to equal the original function evaluated from x equals 4 to x equals 7. And then we did a top minus bottom game. So we take the top value and plug it in and subtract off the bottom value plugged in. So f of 7 minus f of 4, well, that has to equal the area between the curve and the x-axis between 4 and 7. That's what an integral means, right? And so now we would have come back through and said, well, how do I calculate that out? That is going to be using your geometry shapes. So if I split this down the middle here at 6, I have a triangle on this side, and on this other side, I've got a trapezoid. So I've got a 1/2 base times height plus 1/2 base 1 plus base 2 times the height. That's the area of a trapezoid formula. You better know that like the back of your hand because you might run into a trapezoidal Riemann sum on a test at this point. So as we come back in, plugging in what we know, we're trying to find f of 7. F of 4 we had from previous, that is equal to 3. And this is going to equal 1/2 on our triangle here. The base is 2. Then the height on this, that up and down there, that height is also going to be 2. Then we're going to go to that trapezoid. So base 1, we're looking at sort of tip this thing sideways. Base 1 is this base here. That's also going to be 2. Plus base 1 plus base 2 would be this side of the trapezoid. That's just going to be 1. And then the height is this gap right there. So that would be 1. So cleaning this up, we get f of 7 minus 3 would equal 1/2 times 4 for this chunk right here would get us 2 plus 1/2 times this would be 3. So this would be 3/2. And so out of there, we would end up with f of 7 minus 3 equals 2 over 2. So that would be 4 over 2 plus 3 over 2. So we'd end up with 7 over 2 on this side. And then if we add the 3 over, we end up getting out of there f of 7 equals 7 over 2 plus 3 is going to be 6 over 2, so that would be 13 over 2. And we did all that work because why? We needed to know what this value was. So this is going to be 13 over 2 minus 7. Finding your common denominator, that's really 13 over 2. 7 is 14 over 2, and so we get out of there negative 1/2. And so in the end, we find out that that was just unfortunate because this is not the smallest value either. Negative 1/2 is not smaller than negative 3/2. So in the end, where our critical value was at that negative 3/2 right there, that would be our absolute min, would be y equals negative 3/2 or g of x. I guess we would just call it g, or just give it to them as absolute min is equal to negative 3/2. So on this problem, they would have given you 1 point up here for calculating out your critical value. They'd have given you your second point on this at knowing that your absolute min was negative 3/2. And of course, you need all the justification in between there, but the points are kind of distributed like that. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, please click that like button and subscribe. And also share it with your friends and anyone else you know who might be crying about an upcoming AP Calc test. You can find more videos from me, more sample AP Calc questions, and my complete AP Calc study guide over at my website, apcalcprep.com. Have a great one.